The evening sun hung low over the New Mexico desert, bleeding copper and crimson across the endless sky. Dust devils danced across the parched earth, swirling around the hooves of a solitary rider whose shadow stretched long and dark against the sand. His name was Nathan Cross, a man whose boots had walked more miles than most men dared count, whose eyes had seen things that would haunt gentler souls forever. To the scattered homesteaders and town folk, he was just another drifter, silent, hard-eyed, carrying death in a worn holster and secrets in his weathered face. But Nathan wasn't riding for gold or glory this evening. He rode for justice, or perhaps vengeance. The line between the two had blurred years ago until he could no longer tell them apart. He rode for land. Specifically, the deed to a stretch of river valley and canyon known as Crow's Bend, property that had belonged to his family before it was stolen in a crooked card game by a man named Marcus Webb, a gambler turned rancher with more cunning than conscience. Nathan's father had put a bullet in his own head rather than face the shame of losing everything. His mother had followed within a year, dead from grief and consumption in a charity ward back east. Nathan's jaw tightened as the old ranch came into view through the shimmering heat. The place looked smaller than he remembered from childhood visits, the fences sagging under years of neglect, the fields brown and thirsty. He could almost hear his father's voice, hoarse with whiskey and regret in those final days. "Someday, boy, you take back what's ours. Don't let that bastard Webb keep what he stole." That someday had finally arrived after 15 years of wandering, of building a reputation with a gun, of saving every dollar toward this moment. At the edge of the property, smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney. A sound reached his ears, the steady rhythm of an axe biting into wood. Nathan dismounted quietly, his spurs making barely a whisper as he approached the weathered barn. The smell of horses and hay hung thick in the still air, familiar and achingly nostalgic. Then he saw her. A young woman stood with her back to him, swinging an axe with practiced efficiency. She was slender but clearly strong, her movements confident and sure. Dark brown hair fell in a thick braid down her back, and she wore simple work clothes, a faded blue dress with the sleeves rolled up, a leather apron protecting the front. When she turned, startled by the sound of his footsteps despite his caution, Nathan found himself momentarily frozen. Her eyes were remarkable, the color of storm clouds before the rain falls, gray-blue and deep, filled with wariness but also with an unexpected strength. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, but there was something in her face that spoke of burdens carried too young, of responsibilities shouldered before their time. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft but wary. The axe remained in her hands, not raised as a threat but not lowered in welcome either. "What do you want here?" "Name's Cross," Nathan said, touching the brim of his hat in automatic courtesy. "Nathan Cross. I've come to speak with your father about a matter of business." Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something, fear? Recognition, passing across her features. "My father isn't well," she said carefully. "He doesn't receive visitors anymore." "He'll receive this one," Nathan replied, his tone calm but carrying an edge of iron beneath the quiet words. "You tell Marcus Webb that Nathan Cross has come to settle accounts. He'll know what that means." The girl's breath caught audibly, and the color drained from her sun-browned cheeks. "Cross," she whispered, as if the name itself carried weight. "You're Tom Cross's son." "I am," Nathan confirmed, studying her reaction. "So he told you about my father, did he? About how he cheated him out of everything he owned?" She set the axe down slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "That's not. It's more complicated than you know. Please, Mr. Cross, my father is dying. The doctor says he has maybe weeks, possibly only days. Whatever grievance you have, can it not wait until... Until what? Until he's dead and buried with my family's land still in his name?" Nathan's voice remained level, but there was steel beneath it. "I've waited 15 years, miss. I've earned money through blood and sweat and things I'm not proud of. I've come to buy back what's mine, or if he won't sell, to take it through the courts. The deed was fraudulent. I have witnesses now, men who were there that night, men willing to testify." The girl, He realized he didn't even know her name yet, looked at him with those storm cloud eyes, and Nathan saw something in them that made his chest tighten uncomfortably. It was the look of someone who had already lost everything and was bracing to lose what little remained. "Please," she said quietly, and the simple word carried more weight than any long speech could have. "Please come inside. Speak with him if you must. But I'm asking you, as one human being to another, to show mercy. He's suffered enough." Nathan wanted to argue that his father had suffered more, that his mother had died alone and afraid, that mercy was a luxury his family had never been granted. But something in the girl's face stopped him. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps, after so many years of hardness, some small part of him still remembered what compassion felt like. "What's your name?" he asked instead. "Rose," she answered. "Rose Webb." "Well, Miss Webb, lead the way. Let's get this done." The ranch house was small but tidy, every surface bearing the mark of a woman's careful attention. Wildflowers sat in a chipped pottery vase on a rough-hewn table. Clean curtains hung at the windows. The smell of herbs and sickness hung in the air, a combination Nathan recognized from too many deathbeds witnessed over the years. A man lay in a narrow bed pushed against the far wall, propped up on pillows, his breathing labored and wet. Marcus Webb had been a large man once, Nathan could tell, but illness had whittled him down to bones and papery skin. His hair was white, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken and fever-bright. "Father," Rose said gently, moving to his side and taking his hand. "There's someone here to see you. He says his name is Nathan Cross." The sick man's eyes widened, and a spasm that might have been fear or guilt crossed his wasted features. "Cross," he rasped, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Not Nathan Cross. Not Tom's boy." "The same," Nathan confirmed, stepping closer but maintaining a respectful distance. He removed his hat, old habits of courtesy dying hard even in circumstances like these. "I've come about Crow's Bend, Mr. Webb. About the land you won from my father 15 years ago in that card game at the Red Desert Saloon." Webb's eyes closed, and for a moment Nathan thought the man might have fainted or worse. But then he spoke, his words coming slowly, painfully. "Your father, Tom Cross, he lost that land fair and square, boy. I didn't cheat him." "That's a lie and you know it," Nathan said, but there was less heat in his voice than he'd expected. Looking at this broken man, it was hard to summon the rage he'd carried for so long. "I have witnesses now. Men who were there. Men who'll swear you marked the cards, that you plied my father with whiskey until he could barely see straight, then convinced him to bet everything on one hand." A single tear tracked down Webb's withered cheek. "He was already drunk when he sat down," the old man whispered. "Already desperate. I didn't have to do much convincing." "So you admit it," Nathan said flatly. "I admit." Webb coughed, a wet, rattling sound that brought Rose immediately to his side with the cloth. He took a moment to catch his breath before continuing. "I admit I saw an opportunity and I took it. I was a different man then. Harder. Hungrier. I didn't think about the family I was destroying. I just saw land, property, a chance to settle down and make something of myself." "And did you?" Nathan asked quietly. "Make something of yourself?" Webb's bitter laugh turned into another coughing fit. When he could speak again, his voice was hollow. "I made a life. I married. Had a daughter. Tried to be a good man, to make up for what I'd done. But the land, it's cursed, boy. Nothing grows right. The cattle sicken. I've lost money every year, working myself to death trying to make it profitable, trying to earn what I stole." He looked at Nathan with rheumy eyes. "Maybe that's justice. Maybe I got exactly what I deserved." The room fell silent except for Webb's labored breathing and the soft sound of Rose's hand rubbing her father's back in small, comforting circles. Nathan stood there, hat in his hands, feeling the weight of 15 years of anger pressing down on him, suddenly unsure what to do with it. He'd imagined this confrontation so many times. In his mind, Webb had always been defiant, unrepentant, forcing Nathan to take satisfaction in legal victory or, in his darker fantasies, in violence. He never imagined this. A dying man full of regret, a daughter trying desperately to comfort her failing father, a confession freely given but somehow unsatisfying. "I have the money," Nathan heard himself say. "I'll buy the land from you. Pay you what it's worth, maybe a bit more. Enough to see you through, to take care of your daughter after you're gone." Rose looked up sharply, hope and surprise warring in her expression. But Webb shook his head weakly. "Can't sell it," he rasped. "Already mortgaged to the bank in Santa Fe. Twice over. We're buried in debt, boy. Even if I wanted to make it right, I can't. When I die, the bank takes everything. Rose will be left with nothing." His voice broke. "That's my real sin, not what I did to your father, though that was bad enough. My real sin is what I'm leaving my daughter. Nothing but shame and poverty." Nathan felt something crack inside him, some wall he'd built brick by brick over the years. He looked at Rose, saw her blinking back tears, saw the way she held her father's hand with such tenderness despite everything, and he understood something he hadn't wanted to admit. Revenge wouldn't heal anything. Taking back the land wouldn't bring his parents back. All it would do was create more suffering, add another layer to an old wound. "There has to be a way," Rose said suddenly, looking up at Nathan with desperate eyes. "Some solution that doesn't leave either of you empty-handed. You've come so far, waited so long. And my father, whatever he did, he's paid for it. Surely there's something." Nathan opened his mouth to respond, but Webb's coughing fit cut him off. This time it went on longer, the old man's whole body shaking with the violence of it. When it finally subsided, there was blood on the cloth Rose pressed to his lips, and his breathing had become even more labored. "You should rest, father," Rose said urgently. "Please, no more talking. You're making yourself worse." Webb's hand tightened weakly on hers. "Tell him," he gasped. "Tell him the truth. About the game. All of it." Rose looked stricken. "Father, no. It doesn't matter now. Tell him," Webb insisted with what little strength he had left. Nathan looked between them, confused. "Tell me what?" Rose was quiet for a long moment, her face pale, her fingers still wrapped around her father's. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My father didn't just cheat at cards that night, Mr. Cross. He drugged your father's whiskey. Made sure he couldn't think straight, couldn't see the cards properly. It wasn't just about marking the deck. It was calculated, deliberate. He planned the whole thing." The anger Nathan had thought was fading suddenly flared hot and bright again. "He drugged him," he repeated, his voice dangerous. "He deliberately incapacitated my father, and then stole everything he owned." "Yes," Rose whispered, tears now flowing freely. "And I've known about it for years. My father told me when I was 16, when the guilt started eating at him. He made me promise never to tell anyone, said it would destroy us both if the truth came out. So I've carried it too, this terrible secret, this shame." She looked up at Nathan, her storm cloud eyes swimming with tears and something else, a kind of desperate resolve. "But I can't carry it any more, Mr. Cross. You deserve the truth. You deserve justice. And if that means losing everything we have, then so be it. We've been living on stolen ground for too long." Nathan found he couldn't speak. The rage he'd expected to feel was there, yes, but it was mixed with something more complicated, a strange respect for this young woman who had chosen honesty over self-preservation, who was willing to lose everything for the sake of truth. Webb had fallen into an uneasy sleep, his breathing ragged. Rose gently laid his hand down and stood, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I should go," Nathan said finally, his voice rough. "Let him rest. We'll figure out what comes next later." "Wait," Rose said quickly. "Please. Don't leave yet. There's something I need to ask you." Nathan paused, turning back to face her. In the lamplight, she looked young and frightened but also strangely brave, like someone preparing to jump off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. "Ask?" he said. Rose took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and looked him directly in the eye. If I gave you something you value more than land, would you consider letting my father die in peace? Would you let him keep the ranch, or at least not pursue legal action until after he's gone? It won't be long. The doctor was clear about that. Nathan frowned. What could you possibly give me that's worth more than my family's land? Rose's hands trembled as she clasped them in front of her, but her voice was steady when she answered. Myself, Mr. Cross. I'll give you myself. I'll work for you, serve you, do whatever you ask. I'll be your servant, your property, if that's what it takes. Just please, let my father die with some dignity. Let him keep this one last thing. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Nathan stared at her, shocked into silence. Outside, the wind moaned through the canyon, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called to the rising moon. You don't know what you're offering, Nathan said finally, his voice hoarse. I know exactly what I'm offering, Rose replied, lifting her chin despite the fear he could see in her eyes. I'm offering to pay my father's debt with my own freedom. Isn't that justice of a kind? An eye for an eye, a life for a life? Your father's debt isn't yours to pay, Nathan said, but even as he spoke, he felt something shifting inside him, some fundamental change in how he saw this situation, this woman, everything. Then whose is it? Rose challenged. He's dying. You can't collect from a dead man. But I'm here, and I'm willing. Please, Mr. Cross. I'm begging you. Take me instead. Nathan turned away, unable to look at her face, at the desperate courage there. He walked to the window and stared out at the desert night, at the land his father had loved and lost, at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. He thought about his father pulling that trigger, about his mother coughing blood into a rag in a tenement room, about the 15 years he'd spent becoming hard enough to survive this world. And he thought about mercy, about what it cost and what it was worth. When he turned back, Rose was still standing there, waiting, her whole body tense with anticipation and fear. In the bed beyond her, Marcus Webb slept fitfully, already more ghost than man. I'll come back in the morning, Nathan said quietly. We'll talk more then. For now, let your father rest. Let yourself rest too. But, Rose started. Morning, Nathan repeated firmly. I need time to think. And so do you. This isn't a decision to make in the heat of the moment. He settled his hat back on his head and moved toward the door. As he reached for the handle, Rose's voice stopped him. Mr. Cross? He looked back. Thank you, she said softly. For not saying no right away. For giving us this night. Nathan nodded once, unable to trust his voice, and stepped out into the cool desert evening. Behind him, the door closed softly, and he was alone with the stars and the wind and the weight of an impossible choice. He made camp a quarter-mile from the ranch, building a small fire and brewing coffee he couldn't drink. His mind was racing, turning over Rose's offer from every angle, trying to understand what she meant, what she was truly willing to give, what it would mean if he accepted. The night stretched long and cold despite the summer season. Nathan lay on his bedroll, staring at the infinite stars, and for the first time in 15 years, he questioned everything he'd been working toward. Was this justice? Was it vengeance? Was it just another form of theft, taking a young woman's freedom to balance the scales? He didn't have answers. But as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky, Nathan knew one thing for certain. Whatever decision he made when the sun rose, his life would never be the same. The desert dawn broke clear and cold, painting the New Mexico landscape in shades of rose and gold. Nathan had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the stars, wrestling with thoughts that gave him no peace. Now, as he saddled his horse and prepared to ride back to the Webb Ranch, he still didn't know what he would say to Rose. The ranch house looked peaceful in the early light, smoke rising from the chimney indicating someone was already awake. Nathan approached slowly, trying to organize his thoughts, trying to find words for something he never had to articulate before. Rose was on the porch before he could dismount, as if she'd been watching for him. She wore the same faded blue dress from yesterday, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, her face pale but composed. She'd clearly spent a sleepless night as well. "Mr. Cross," she greeted him quietly. "I've made coffee. And there's breakfast if you'll take it." "Thank you, Miss Webb," Nathan replied, tying his horse to the rail and following her inside. The interior of the ranch house looked different in the morning light, still poor, still shabby in places, but clean and well kept. A pot of porridge bubbled on the stove, and she'd set the table with mismatched plates that had clearly seen better days. Marcus Webb still lay in his bed, apparently sleeping, his breathing audible across the room. They sat across from each other at the small table, the coffee steaming between them. For a long moment neither spoke. "Did he rest well?" Nathan finally asked, nodding toward the sick man. "As well as can be expected," Rose replied. "He was restless. Talking in his sleep, saying your father's name. I think—" She hesitated, then continued, "I think he's been waiting for this. For someone to come and call him to account. It's been eating at him for years." Nathan wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, feeling its warmth. "And you?" he asked. "Have you been waiting too?" Rose met his eyes steadily. "I've been waiting for it to be over. The secret, the guilt, the slow dying. Yes, I've been waiting. About what you said last night," Nathan began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. "I meant it," Rose said firmly, before he could go on. "Every word. I know what I'm offering, Mr. Cross. I'm not a child. I'm 22 years old, and I've thought carefully about this. If you'll spare my father, let him die here in his home, with his dignity intact, I'll give you whatever you ask in return." Nathan set down his cup carefully. "You realize what you're suggesting sounds a lot like slavery. That's been illegal for years now, Miss Webb." A flush crept up her cheeks. "I'm not suggesting slavery. I'm suggesting service. Indenture, if you want to call it that. Like the old contracts people used to sign to pay passage to America. I'll work for you, serve you, until my father's debt is paid." "And how long would that take?" Nathan asked. "How do you measure the value of land against the value of a human life?" Rose was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," she admitted. 5 years? 10? However long you think is fair. There's nothing fair about any of this," Nathan said, his voice harder than he intended. "Your father stole from mine. My father killed himself. My mother died alone and afraid. Your father is dying, and you're willing to sell yourself to protect him. Where's the fairness in any of it?" "There isn't any," Rose agreed, and there was steel beneath her soft voice now. "Life isn't fair, Mr. Cross. But we make the choices we can live with. This is mine. I can't undo what my father did. I can't bring your parents back. But I can offer you this one thing, my labor, my service, my life if that's what you want, in exchange for mercy. That's all I have to give." Nathan stood abruptly and walked to the window, needing the distance. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving. He'd spent his whole adult life in places like this, hard places that made hard men, places where mercy was weakness and compassion was a luxury no one could afford. But standing here now, in this shabby little ranch house with a dying man in one corner, and his desperate daughter offering to sacrifice everything, Nathan felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt human again, fully human, with all the complicated emotions he'd been trying to bury under anger and purpose. "Why?" he asked, not turning around. "Why would you do this for him? He's not even your real father, is he?" He heard Rose's sharp intake of breath behind him. "How did you know? You don't look anything like him. And the way you said my father yesterday, there was something in your voice. A choice, not just a fact." Rose was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "You're right. Marcus Webb found me when I was 7 years old, half-starved and alone after my real parents died of fever. He took me in, raised me as his own, never treated me as anything less than his daughter. Whatever else he's done, whatever sins he's committed, he saved my life. So yes, I'll do anything to give him peace at the end. Wouldn't you do the same? The question hit Nathan like a physical blow. Wouldn't you do the same? He thought about his own parents, about the lengths he'd gone to in pursuit of justice for them. 15 years of his life dedicated to this moment, this reckoning. How was what he'd done any different from what Rose was trying to do now? Your father's awake, Rose said softly. Nathan turned to see Marcus Webb's eyes open, watching them both with a clarity that suggested he'd heard at least part of their conversation. Cross, the old man rasped. Come here. Nathan crossed the room slowly, stopping beside the bed. Up close, Webb looked even worse than he had the night before, skin gray, lips blue-tinged, each breath clearly an effort. I heard what my girl offered you, Webb said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I'm telling you now, don't take it. I don't want her sacrificing her life for my sins. Father, Rose protested, but Webb lifted a shaking hand to silence her. No, Rose. Let me say this. He focused on Nathan with effort. You want the land? Take it. I'm putting it in writing today. Whatever the bank says, whatever debts there are, that's between you and them now. The deed goes back to a cross, as it should have stayed. That's the only justice I can offer. And Rose? Nathan asked quietly. Rose goes free, Webb said firmly, then was seized by coughing that left specks of blood on his lips. When he could speak again, his voice was weaker but determined. She's young. Smart. She'll make her way. I've taught her everything I know about ranching. She can find work, start over somewhere. But she doesn't pay for what I did. That debt dies with me. Rose had moved to her father's side, tears streaming down her face. Father, stop. You can't just give away everything. What about the bank? They'll come after Mr. Cross, try to take the land for the mortgage. Let them try, Webb said, a ghost of his former strength showing through. I've got paperwork. Letters. Proof that the original deed was obtained through fraud. Once that comes out, the bank's claim becomes worthless. They knowingly accepted stolen property as collateral. He looked at Nathan. There's a lawyer in Santa Fe, man named Harrison Chin. He's been helping me put all this together for the past year, since I knew I was dying. He'll make sure everything goes through properly. Nathan stared at the dying man, trying to process what he was hearing. You've been planning to give the land back? Planning to make it right, Webb corrected weakly. Best I could anyway. Can't undo the past, but I could try to fix the future. Rose didn't know. I kept it from her, didn't want her hoping for things that might not happen. But you showing up now, maybe that's Providence. Maybe that's God giving me one last chance to do the right thing. I don't want charity, Nathan said stiffly. I came prepared to buy the land, to earn it back through legal means. This isn't charity, Webb said. This is restitution. And it's incomplete at that. I can't give you back your father, or your mother, or the 15 years you spent wandering. I can't even give you the land free and clear, you'll have to fight the bank for it. But I can give you the legal foundation to win that fight. That's what I'm offering. Take it, and let my daughter go free. Rose was openly weeping now, her hand clasped tight around her father's. Father, you should have told me. All this time I thought. I know what you thought, Webb said gently. That's why I didn't tell you. Didn't want you burdened with it if I failed. But now Cross is here, and we can finish this properly. He turned his fading gaze back to Nathan. What do you say, boy? Will you let me die having finally done one decent thing? Nathan stood there, feeling the weight of the moment, the years of anger and pain and determination all coming down to this one decision. He looked at Rose, at her tear-stained face and the desperate hope in her eyes. He looked at Marcus Webb, a man who'd done terrible things but was trying, at the very end, to make them right. And he thought about his father, about what Tom Cross would have wanted. Not revenge. Not suffering. Just justice, and maybe, if possible, something better than justice. Something like mercy. All right, Nathan heard himself say. All right, Mr. Webb. I'll take your offer. But on one condition. Name it, Webb whispered. Nathan looked at Rose. Your daughter stays here as long as you're alive. She shouldn't have to leave while you're still breathing. And after, if she wants to stay on and help me work the land, she can. As a partner, not a servant. 50-50 split on everything the ranch produces until she's earned enough to start over somewhere if she chooses, or to stay on permanent if that's what she prefers. Rose's eyes went wide. Mr. Cross, I can't, that's too much. It's not enough, Nathan said firmly. Not for what your family lost, not for what my family lost, not for any of it. But it's what I'm offering. You want to pay your father's debt? Fine. Help me make this ranch into something worth having. Help me turn stolen ground into honest land. That's how you pay it back, not by enslaving yourself, but by building something better. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus Webb's lined face creased into something that might have been a smile. Your father would be proud, he said softly. Tom Cross raised a better man than I ever was. We'll see, Nathan said, but his voice was gentler now. Now, this lawyer in Santa Fe, Chin, you said? I need to know everything about what you've arranged. Webb nodded weakly. Rose, get the papers. From the box under my bed. Show him everything. As Rose moved to comply, Nathan pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down. For the next hour, he and Webb talked through the details. The evidence of fraud that had been collected, the legal strategy Chin had developed, the likely challenges from the bank, the steps that would need to be taken after Webb's death to finalize the transfer of the deed. It was strange, Nathan thought, sitting here planning the future with the man who'd destroyed his past. But there was something right about it too, something that felt like a wound finally beginning to heal, even if the scar would always remain. By the time they finished, Webb was exhausted, his breathing more labored than ever. Rose brought him water and medicine, her movements gentle and practiced. You should rest, Father, she said softly. You've done enough for today. Webb nodded, his eyes already closing. But before he slipped into sleep, he reached out and caught Nathan's hand with surprising strength. Thank you, he whispered, for giving me this. For not making her pay for my sins. Nathan squeezed the frail hand once, gently, then released it. Rest easy, Mr. Webb. As Webb's breathing evened out into sleep, Nathan stood and moved to the window, suddenly needing air, needing space to process everything that had happened in the past hour. Behind him, he heard Rose quietly clearing the table, the small domestic sounds oddly comforting. Mr. Cross? She said after a while. He turned to find her standing in the middle of the room, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression uncertain. I don't know how to thank you, she began. Don't, Nathan interrupted. Don't thank me yet. You realize what you've agreed to. Hard work, long days, and no guarantee of success. The bank's going to fight us on this. The land's in poor condition. It could take years to make anything of it, if we can at all. I know, Rose said quietly. But it's honest work. And it's better than. She trailed off, her cheeks coloring. Better than what you were willing to do, Nathan finished for her. Which, for the record, I was never going to accept. Even if your father hadn't made his offer, I wasn't going to take you up on yours. Rose looked up, surprised. Why not? Nathan was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. Because I've spent 15 years being angry, he finally said. Being hard. Doing whatever it took to survive and to get to this point. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to be human. But last night, listening to you offer to sacrifice everything for your father, seeing the courage that took. He paused, shaking his head. It reminded me of what matters. Of who I want to be versus who I've become. And who do you want to be? Rose asked softly. Nathan managed a small, tired smile. I'm still figuring that out. But I know it's not the kind of man who'd take a woman's freedom as payment for a debt. Rose was quiet for a long moment, her storm cloud eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, she smiled too, a small, genuine smile that transformed her whole face. Then maybe we can figure it out together, she said. Who we want to be, I mean. Both of us starting over, building something new on this old ground. Maybe we can, Nathan agreed. They stood there in the quiet ranch house, the morning sun streaming through the windows, Marcus Webb sleeping peacefully in the corner, and for the first time in longer than Nathan could remember, he felt something like hope stirring in his chest. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange suspension of time. Marcus Webb lingered, neither improving nor rapidly declining, hovering in that twilight space between life and death. Nathan moved his camp to the ranch, sleeping in the barn at first, then accepting Rose's offer of a small room in the house after she insisted it was foolish to sleep outside when there was space inside. They fell into a routine born of necessity and habit. Nathan rose before dawn to tend the horses and what livestock remained. Rose cooked simple meals and cared for her father, whose moments of lucidity grew shorter and further apart. In the evenings, they sat on the porch together, watching the desert sunset and talking about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Nathan learned that Rose could read and write, unusual for a woman raised on the frontier. Webb had insisted on teaching her, she said, perhaps trying to make up for his own lack of formal education. She loved books, though they had precious few, and she'd read the 3 novels they owned so many times she could recite passages from memory. What's your favorite? Nathan asked one evening, curious despite himself. Jane Eyre, Rose answered without hesitation. Have you read it? Nathan shook his head. Never had much time for reading. Had to work from the time I was young, and after what happened, I was too busy moving, too busy trying to survive. I could read it to you, Rose offered. In the evenings if you'd like. It might help pass the time. And so she did. As the desert stars wheeled overhead and the coyotes called to each other across the empty miles, Rose read to Nathan in her soft, clear voice. He found himself drawn into the story despite his initial skepticism, relating to the orphan protagonist's struggles more than he wanted to admit. One evening, as Rose was reading about Jane's confrontation with Mr. Rochester, Marcus Webb called out weakly from his bed. They both rushed inside to find him awake and alert, more so than he'd been in days. Rose, he said, his voice thin but urgent. The papers. Did you show Cross all the papers? Yes, father, Rose assured him, taking his hand. He's seen everything. It's all arranged. Webb's eyes shifted to Nathan. Chun. You have to see Chin in Santa Fe. Soon. Before. He coughed, unable to finish. I know, Nathan said quietly. I'll ride out tomorrow. Get everything started with the legal process. Take Rose with you, Webb insisted. She needs to be on the documents too. Witness. Make sure. Another coughing fit seized him. Father, rest, Rose pleaded. Don't strain yourself. But Webb gripped her hand with surprising strength. Listen to me. Both of you. I don't have much time left. Days, maybe hours. Before I go, I need to know this is settled. That you'll both be all right. We will be, Nathan said, and realized he meant it. I give you my word. Webb's gaze held Nathan's for a long moment, then he nodded, satisfied. Good man, he whispered. Better man than me. His eyes closed, and his breathing steadied into sleep. Rose looked at Nathan, worry clear in her expression. He's getting worse. I don't think he has much time left. Then we should ride to Santa Fe at first light, Nathan said. Get this finished so he can rest easy. Can you leave him for a day? Rose bit her lip, torn. Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch, she's helped nurse him before. I could ask her to come sit with him. She's a good woman, and she'll make sure he's comfortable. Then that's what we'll do, Nathan decided. They left the next morning before dawn, Mrs. Henderson installed at Marcus Webb's bedside with instructions and supplies. The ride to Santa Fe took most of the day, and they spoke little, both lost in their own thoughts. Nathan found himself acutely aware of Rose riding beside him, the way she sat her horse with natural grace, the determination in her profile, the strength she'd shown through all of this. Santa Fe was larger than Nathan had expected, a sprawling town where Spanish architecture mixed with newer American buildings. Harrison Chen's office was on the plaza, above a mercantile. The lawyer himself was a surprise, a Chinese man in his 40s, impeccably dressed in American style, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. "Mr. Cross," Chen said, rising to shake Nathan's hand. "I've been expecting you. Marcus wrote to me several weeks ago, said you might be coming. And you must be Miss Webb." He bowed slightly to Rose. "Mr. Webb said you'd been helping him put together evidence about the original deed," Nathan said, getting straight to business. "About the fraud." Chen nodded, moving to a cabinet and pulling out a thick folder. "I have statements from 3 men who were present at the card game, all willing to testify that Marcus Webb deliberately drugged your father and cheated at cards. I also have documentation of similar schemes Webb ran before settling down, which establishes a pattern of behavior. It's enough to invalidate the original transfer of property." "And the bank's mortgage?" Nathan asked. "That's trickier," Chen admitted. "The bank will argue they acted in good faith, that they had no knowledge of the fraud. But I believe we can establish that they had reason to know, or should have investigated more thoroughly before accepting stolen property as collateral. It won't be easy, but we have a strong case." For the next 2 hours, they went over the details. Chen was thorough, asking questions, explaining legal strategies, making sure both Nathan and Rose understood what would happen next. By the time they finished, Nathan's head was spinning with information, but he felt more confident about the path forward. "One more thing," Chen said as they were preparing to leave. He looked at Rose. "Your father asked me to prepare this for you." He handed her an envelope. Rose opened it with trembling fingers and pulled out a legal document. As she read, tears began to stream down her face. "What is it?" Nathan asked gently. It's a will," Rose whispered. "Leaving me everything he owns, even though it's not much. And there's a letter." She read aloud, her voice breaking. "Rose, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the life I gave you, rough and poor and tainted by my sins. But you were the one good thing I ever did. Taking you in, raising you, loving you like my own, that's the only thing I'm proud of. Be happy, girl. Be free. You don't owe me anything, and you never did. You gave me more than I ever deserved. Your father, Marcus Webb." Nathan watched as Rose broke down completely, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Without thinking, he put his arm around her, offering what comfort he could. She leaned into him, crying for the father who'd saved her, for the years of hardship, for the relief and grief all mixed together. Chen tactfully busied himself with papers, giving them privacy. When Rose finally composed herself, she wiped her eyes and straightened. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Nathan interrupted. "You've held it together through everything. You're entitled to break down once in a while." They thanked Chen and promised to return once they had news of Marcus Webb's passing. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them processing the day's events and dreading what they might find when they arrived. It was full dark when they finally reached the ranch. Even from a distance, Nathan could see that something was wrong. Every lamp in the house was lit, and Mrs. Henderson was standing on the porch, watching for them. "He's going," she said simply as they dismounted. "Been calling for you both. Hurry." They rushed inside to find Marcus Webb awake but clearly failing. His breathing was shallow and labored, his skin waxy and gray. But when he saw them, his eyes brightened slightly. "You went?" he rasped. "Saw Chen?" "We did," Nathan confirmed, moving to the bedside. "Everything's arranged. The land will go back to my family name, and Rose is provided for. You can rest easy." Webb managed a weak smile. "Good. Good." His eyes found Rose. "My girl. Come here." Rose knelt beside the bed, taking his hand in both of hers. "I'm here, Father. I'm here." "Read me something," Webb whispered. "That book you love. The one about the orphan girl." Rose's voice shook as she picked up Jane Eyre from the table and opened to a random page. She began to read, her words soft and steady despite the tears running down her face. Nathan stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, while Mrs. Henderson quietly moved about the room, straightening things that didn't need straightening. Rose read for perhaps 20 minutes before she realized Marcus Webb's breathing had changed. She stopped mid-sentence, looking down at him. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful, the lines of pain and guilt finally smoothed away. "Father?" she whispered. Then, louder, more desperate. "Father?" Nathan gently placed his fingers on Webb's neck, feeling for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there. He shook his head slightly. "He's gone, Rose. He's at peace now." Rose made a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp, then buried her face in her hands. Nathan knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms as she wept. Mrs. Henderson quietly left, giving them privacy in their grief. They buried Marcus Webb the next morning on a hillside overlooking the ranch, in a spot Rose said he'd always loved. Nathan fashioned a rough cross from mesquite wood while Mrs. Henderson and Rose prepared the body for burial. A circuit preacher happened to be passing through and agreed to say a few words. The service was small, just Nathan, Rose, Mrs. Henderson, and a handful of neighbors who'd known Webb in his later, quieter years. The preacher spoke about redemption and second chances, about how every man's life contained both darkness and light, and how what mattered was which one you chose to walk toward in the end. Rose stood dry through the service, holding herself together with visible effort. But when the last shovelful of dirt had been placed on the grave and the others had left, she finally let herself break. Nathan held her while she cried, her tears soaking into his shirt, her body shaking with the force of her grief. "He was a good father to me," she sobbed. "Whatever else he did, whatever sins he carried, he loved me. He saved me when no one else would." "I know," Nathan said quietly. "He told me as much. And he died knowing you were taken care of, knowing he'd finally made things right. That's more than most men get." They stood there on the hillside as the sun climbed higher, warming the desert air. Eventually Rose's tears subsided, and she stepped back, wiping her face with a handkerchief. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Now we work," Nathan said. "We file the papers with Chin, fight the bank if we have to, and we start fixing up this ranch. Make it into something worth having." Rose looked at him with those storm cloud eyes, red-rimmed now from crying. "You really meant what you said? About partnership? You'd share the ranch with me?" "I meant every word," Nathan confirmed. 50-50. We work together, we succeed or fail together. That's the deal." "Why?" Rose asked. "You don't have to do this. The land will be yours legally. You could send me away with a few dollars and no one would blame you." Nathan was quiet for a moment, looking out over the ranch, the sagging fences, the dry fields, the mountains rising blue and distant on the horizon. "Because your father asked me to take care of you," he finally said. "And because I've spent too many years alone. Too many years being hard. Maybe it's time to try something different. Build something instead of just taking back what was lost." Rose studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded slowly. "All right then. Partners." She held out her hand, and Nathan shook it, sealing the bargain. Her grip was firm and her palm was calloused from work, the hand of someone who understood labor and wasn't afraid of it. "Come on," Nathan said. "Let's go home. We have a lot of work ahead of us." The weeks that followed were hard ones. Nathan rode back to Santa Fe to file all the necessary legal documents with Chin, then waited while the lawyer began the process of invalidating the bank's claim on the property. As Chin had predicted, the bank fought back hard, hiring their own attorneys and threatening to drag the case through the courts for years. But Chin was good at his job. He systematically presented the evidence of fraud, the witness statements, the documentation of Webb's past schemes. Slowly, grudgingly, the bank's position began to weaken. They couldn't defend holding a mortgage on property that had been obtained through criminal means. While the legal battle played out, Nathan and Rose worked the ranch. They repaired fences, cleared irrigation ditches, tended what livestock remained. It was backbreaking work, dawn to dusk every day, but there was something satisfying about it, about building something with their hands, about watching the land slowly respond to their care. They fell into an easy partnership. Nathan handled the heavy labor, mending buildings, breaking horses, dealing with the few neighboring ranchers. Rose managed the house, the garden, and the financial records, which she kept with meticulous precision in a ledger Webb had left behind. In the evenings, they sat on the porch together, too tired for much conversation but comfortable in each other's presence. Sometimes Rose read aloud from her small collection of books. Sometimes they just watched the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors. Sometimes they talked about their plans for the ranch, for the future. Nathan found himself noticing things about Rose he hadn't before. The way she tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way her laugh sounded when something genuinely amused her, the quiet strength she showed in everything she did. She'd never be conventionally beautiful, with her sun-browned skin and work-roughened hands, but there was something about her that drew his eye, something that made his chest feel tight in a way he didn't fully understand. He tried not to think about it too much. They were partners, nothing more. She was young, barely half his age, and she'd been through enough without him complicating things with feelings she probably didn't share. So he kept his distance, kept things professional, tried to ignore the way his heart sped up when she smiled at him. If Rose noticed his restraint, she didn't comment on it. She went about her work with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything, never complaining, never asking for more than he was offering. But sometimes Nathan caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something like curiosity mixed with something else he didn't dare name. 3 months after Marcus Webb's death, Harrison Chen sent word that the case was settled. The bank had agreed to drop their claim on the property in exchange for Nathan agreeing not to pursue legal action against them for accepting fraudulent collateral. The land was his, legally, officially, finally. Nathan and Rose traveled to Santa Fe together to sign the final papers. As Chen handed Nathan the deed that had cost his father everything, that had defined Nathan's life for 15 years, he felt oddly empty. This was supposed to be the moment of triumph, of vindication. But all he felt was tired, and perhaps a little sad for all the years lost, all the anger that had driven him. "Congratulations, Mr. Cross," Chen said, shaking his hand. "Justice has been served." "I suppose it has," Nathan agreed, but his voice lacked conviction. On the ride back to the ranch, their ranch now, he reminded himself, Rose was unusually quiet. Finally, as they were setting up camp for the night, she spoke. "You don't seem happy," she observed. "You finally got what you wanted. What you've been working toward for 15 years. Nathan poked at the fire, watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. "I thought I'd feel different," he admitted. "Vindicated. Satisfied. Something. But mostly I just feel." He trailed off, searching for the word. "Hello?" Rose suggested quietly. Nathan looked at her sharply. "Yes." "How did you know?" "Because revenge never fills you the way you think it will," Rose said. "It just leaves you empty, with nothing to chase anymore, no purpose driving you forward. My father told me that once, in one of his clearer moments near the end. He said he'd spent years trying to fill the hole his guilt had carved, but nothing worked. Not money, not land, not even raising me, as much as he loved me. The hole was still there. So what do you do?" Nathan asked. "How do you fill it?" Rose was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "I think maybe you don't fill it. You just learn to live with it. And maybe, if you're lucky, you find something new to build your life around. Something better than anger or guilt or revenge." "And what would that be?" Nathan asked. Rose looked up at him, her storm cloud eyes reflecting the firelight. "I don't know yet," she said softly. "But I think we might be able to figure it out together. If you want to, that is." There was something in her voice, in her expression that made Nathan's breath catch. For a long moment, they just looked at each other across the fire, the desert night vast and silent around them. Rose, Nathan began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. I need to tell you something. These past few months, working with you, building this ranch together, it's been the best part of my life. Better than I deserve, probably. And he took a breath. I've come to care for you. More than just as a partner. More than I probably should, given the difference in our ages, given everything that's happened. Rose's eyes widened, but she didn't look away. I wondered if you felt it too, she said quietly. I've been feeling the same way for weeks now. Trying to tell myself it was just gratitude, or loneliness, or just two people thrown together by circumstance. But it's more than that, isn't it? Yes, Nathan said simply. It's more than that. At least for me. Rose stood and walked around the fire to where Nathan sat. She knelt beside him, her face serious. I'm 22 years old, Nathan. Old enough to know my own mind. Old enough to make my own choices. And I choose this. I choose you if you'll have me. Not because I owe you anything, not because I need protection or security. But because in these months together, I've seen who you really are beneath all that hardness you built up. I've seen your kindness, your honesty, your willingness to choose mercy over vengeance. And I've fallen in love with that man. Nathan felt his throat tighten with emotion. You're sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. And I'm not an easy man, Rose. I've got years of anger and pain that I'm still working through. I'll probably be difficult and stubborn in. Rose stopped him by placing her fingers gently on his lips. I know exactly who you are, she said. And I'm not asking for perfect. I'm just asking for honest. For real. Can you give me that? Nathan reached up and took her hand, pressing his lips to her palm. Yes, he said. I can give you that. She smiled then, that transforming smile that lit up her whole face, and Nathan felt something shift inside him, the hollow place she'd described beginning to fill with something warm and alive and hopeful. He pulled her closer, and she came willingly, settling against his chest as naturally as if she'd always belonged there. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers, watching the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. And for the first time since he was a boy, Nathan Cross felt completely at peace. They returned to the ranch the next day as something more than partners, though they were careful to keep their new relationship quiet at first. Mrs. Henderson, who'd become a frequent visitor, checking on Rose and occasionally helping with cooking, seemed to suspect something had changed, but she kept her own counsel. Nathan and Rose worked out a new arrangement. She'd keep her own room, he'd keep his, at least until they could marry properly. It wouldn't be seemly otherwise, especially in a small frontier community where reputation mattered. But in the evenings, after the work was done, they sat together on the porch, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest, planning their future. A month later, they were married by the same circuit preacher who'd spoken at Marcus Webb's funeral. It was a simple ceremony, held at the ranch with just Mrs. Henderson and a few neighbors as witnesses. Rose wore a dress she'd made herself from fabric Nathan had bought in Santa Fe, simple blue calico, but it made her eyes look like storm clouds touched by sunlight. As they exchanged vows, Nathan thought about the long journey that had brought him here, 15 years of anger and wandering, of becoming hard enough to survive, of single-minded pursuit of justice. And he thought about how differently it had all turned out than he'd imagined. Not the triumphant reclaiming of his birthright, not the satisfaction of crushing his enemy, but this, a quiet wedding, a partnership built on mutual respect, a love that had grown slowly from unexpected soil. I do, he said when the preacher asked if he took Rose as his wife, and meant it with his whole heart. I do, Rose echoed, her eyes shining with tears and happiness. When the preacher declared them married, Nathan kissed his bride gently, tasting salt from her happy tears, and felt the last of his old anger finally release its grip on his heart. The years that followed were good ones, better than either of them had any right to expect. The ranch prospered slowly, gradually, as they poured their labor and love into it. They built a new barn, expanded the house, bought more cattle and horses. Rose's garden flourished, providing vegetables they sold in Santa Fe. Nathan's horses developed a reputation for quality throughout the territory. They had children, first a son they named Thomas, after Nathan's father, then twin daughters, then another son. The house filled with noise and laughter and the comfortable chaos of family life. Nathan proved to be a surprisingly good father, patient, and kind in ways he never expected from himself. Rose bloomed in motherhood, her quiet strength becoming a foundation the whole family built on. She kept the books, managed the household, raised the children, and still found time to read voraciously and teach her sons and daughters to love learning as much as she did. Sometimes, in the evenings after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch together, older now, weathered by sun and work and years, but still comfortable in each other's presence. They talk about their day, their plans, their memories. "Do you ever regret it?" Rose asked one evening, years after their wedding. "Taking me on as a partner instead of just claiming the land for yourself?" Nathan pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her graying hair. "Not for a single moment," he said. "That land was never what I really needed. I just didn't know it until you showed me." "And what did you need?" Rose asked, though she already knew the answer. "Home," Nathan said simply. "Family. Someone to build something with, instead of just taking back what was lost. You gave me that, Rose. You gave me everything." She tilted her head up to kiss him, slow and sweet and full of years of partnership and love. "You gave me everything too," she whispered. "Freedom to choose, respect, love. Everything my father hoped for me when he made his final arrangements." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in familiar colors, copper and blood and gold. Somewhere in the distance, their children were playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The land around them, once stolen and fought over and nearly destroyed by bitterness, now flourished under their care. Nathan thought about Marcus Webb sometimes, about the dying man who'd chosen redemption over pride, who'd given Nathan the chance to choose mercy over vengeance. He thought about his own father, and hoped that somewhere, Tom Cross knew that his son had gotten justice in the end, not the harsh, satisfying justice of revenge, but the deeper, more healing justice of things made right, of new life growing from old wounds. "Thank you," Nathan said softly. Rose looked up at him, curious. "For what?" "For offering yourself that day," Nathan said. "For being brave enough to do something that desperate, that selfless. If you hadn't, I might have taken the land and kept my anger and missed everything that really mattered." Rose smiled, that same transforming smile he'd fallen in love with years ago. "And thank you for being the kind of man who could refuse such an offer," she replied. "For choosing mercy when you could have chosen revenge. For seeing who I could be instead of just what I was offering." They kissed again, and then Rose rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The desert wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage and possibility, of forgiveness and hope. And in that moment, on that porch, surrounded by everything they'd built together from anger and grief and unexpected grace, Nathan Cross and Rose Webb Cross knew that they'd found something more valuable than any stolen land could ever be. They'd found home. They'd found each other. They'd found peace. The past couldn't be undone. Tom Cross would never know that his son had finally reclaimed the family land. Marcus Webb would never fully atone for what he'd stolen. The years of pain and wandering couldn't be erased. But they could be redeemed. They could be transformed into something new, something better. From the ashes of old wrongs, new life could grow. And that, Nathan thought, holding his wife close under the endless New Mexico stars, was a better ending than revenge ever could have given him. Justice had been served, but more importantly, mercy had been chosen. And in that choice, everyone had won something far more precious than land or vindication. They'd won a future worth living, built on forgiveness and partnership and love that grew stronger with each passing year. The desert night settled around them, vast and beautiful and forgiving, and Nathan Cross finally, completely, came home.